There are certain names in American history that never made it into textbooks, not because they were forgotten, but because someone made sure they were erased. The Whitmore Clan is one of those names. In the autumn of 1871, in the cold hills of Kentucky, a wedding took place that no witness would ever speak of openly again. What began with music, lace, and the promise of unity dissolved into something far more sinister, something designed to bind flesh, blood, and spirit in a covenant darker than any church could sanction. Imagine it, a stone house on the edge of a forest, lanterns flickering against the walls as guests drink and laugh, oblivious to the fact that they've been invited into a trap. They think they're here for a celebration. What they're walking into is a ritual, one so corrosive, so deliberately engineered to shatter innocence that even the survivors would question if they had dreamed it. But it wasn't a dream, it was engineered theater, an initiation masked as matrimony. The Whitmores were not an ordinary family. They carried influence like a weapon, running land deals, coal interests, and something else unspoken, an underground system of power that ran parallel to official law. They weren't loyal to church or country. They were loyal only to their own blood pact, a pact enforced by ritual, and the wedding night ritual was the crown jewel of their control. On September 17, 1871, Eliza Whitmore, barely 20 years old, stood in white lace beside a man twice her age. His name was Captain Nathaniel Ward, a Civil War veteran decorated for bravery, but broken in ways no medal could disguise. Their union wasn't born of love, it was calculated, transactional, and chosen by the Whitmore patriarchs. But what Ward didn't know, what no outsider ever suspected, was that he wasn't just marrying Eliza, he was marrying the entire clan, body and soul. The guests' toast. Asad. The preacher spoke words that sounded holy enough, but once the last hymn ended and the lamps were dimmed, the true ceremony began, and in that hidden chamber beneath the Whitmore estate, a ritual unfolded that history was never meant to record. This wasn't about love, it was about possession. Beneath the Whitmore estate was a chamber older than the house itself. The foundation stone carried markings no local mason admitted carving, symbols etched deep, half Celtic, half something older, resembling the spiral cuts found on burial mounds in forgotten Europe. The Whitmores claimed the room was their inheritance, a place where family vows were bound not by God or law, but by something far more enduring: fear. When the wedding feast above quieted and the last neighbors departed, only a select circle remained. Eliza's new husband, Captain Ward, was ushered down a stairwell lined with oil lamps, his steps echoing against cold limestone. He believed it was a private family blessing. What he found instead was a circle of Whitmores, uncles, cousins, siblings, all waiting, each holding a silver vessel filled with a dark liquid they called the blood wine. It was no wine. Accounts that surfaced decades later described a bitter, metallic taste that burned the throat and blurred the mind. Opium tincture, hallucinogenic mushrooms, and dried roots known only to the women of the family. The mixture stripped away defenses, peeling men open until they confessed things they had sworn never to speak. Ward didn't know it yet, but he had just swallowed his own undoing. The patriarch, Elias Whitmore, presided over the ritual. He was a man whose presence silenced rooms before he opened his mouth, gaunt, hollow-eyed, yet radiating a command that made even his own sons flinch. He began the chant, half in English, half in a broken tongue that sounded like German twisted into something unrecognizable. With each verse, the circle closed tighter, the lamps casting distorted shadows that crawled up the chamber walls like living things. Ward was instructed to kneel. His bride, Eliza, stood beside him, her expression unreadable. Was it fear? Was it complicity? No one could tell. What is certain is that she raised a blade, not to harm him, but to cut her own palm, dripping blood into the cup he had just drained. The Whitmores believed that no outsider could truly belong to them until they carried Whitmore blood in their body. The room was silent except for the sound of Ward's breathing, ragged and uneven as the potion took hold. The patriarch's voice cut through the silence. From this night forward, you are ours, not as husband, not as kin, but as property, body, soul, and secret. The blood marks you, the vow binds you, and there is no leaving the Whitmores alive. The ritual had only begun. The first hour inside that chamber blurred the line between ritual and interrogation. The Whitmores didn't just initiate, they extracted. Every outsider brought into their blood pact was forced to lay bare the secrets he carried, financial, military, personal. The blood wine loosened tongues and dissolved boundaries. Captain Ward, sweating and trembling, tried to resist, but the concoction had already hollowed him out. His words tumbled into the room like stones torn from a collapsing wall. He confessed what he thought no one knew, that he had deserted once during the war, abandoning a dying comrade, that his medals were bought through influence, not earned by courage, that he had debts to creditors in Lexington who would ruin him if they spoke. The Whitmores listened in silence, recording every weakness like merchants tallying coins. They didn't marry men for love. They acquired leverage, and with leverage, they built empires. Eliza did not flinch. She stood as if carved from the stone walls, her cut hand still seeping slowly into the cloth she pressed against it. Her eyes followed Ward, but whether she pitied him or despised him, no one could read. Perhaps she was already more Whitmore than bride. The patriarch, Elias, lifted his hand and the family began to chant again, voices layering into a low drone that rattled the ribcage. It wasn't melody. It was control. The kind of sound that worms into a man's mind, convincing him he's smaller, weaker, owned. Ward shook his head, tried to rise, but two of Elias's sons pressed him back down, forcing his palms onto the carved table at the center of the room. On that table were symbols etched so deep that no flame could erase them. Circles within circles, intersecting crosses, runes half-remembered from old European grimoires. At the center, a hollow filled with ash. Elias took a pinch of that ash and pressed it into Ward's mouth. The taste was sulfur, bitter, suffocating. The patriarch whispered, "You are not free. You will never be free. Speak your vow." Ward, barely conscious, repeated the words fed to him. He promised silence, obedience, and loyalty beyond death. The family repeated the vow with him, voices rising, a chorus binding him tighter than any rope could. When it ended, Elias placed his hand on the soldier's head like a priest blessing a convert, but there was no blessing in it. It was ownership. And that night, in the Whitmore chamber, a man ceased to be a man. He became an instrument. When Captain Ward was finally pulled to his feet, he was no longer seen as a guest or even a groom. He was stripped of dignity, reduced to something malleable in the Whitmore's hands. The family surrounded him like hunters closing in on prey, each one testing his limits. They asked questions they already knew the answers to, about his regiment, about the men he had killed, about the things he had stolen during wartime. The point wasn't information. The point was breaking him until he understood the truth. There was no outside once you entered this circle. You were theirs, and theirs alone. But what made the ritual so disturbing was not the brutality. It was the precision. This wasn't chaos. This was methodology. The Whitmores had perfected the art of psychological dismantling long before anyone in America spoke of mind control. They didn't just want Ward's obedience. They wanted his identity hollowed out, replaced with something useful to them. Eliza stood beside him, her pale dress now smeared with streaks of her own blood. She was expected to speak next. Every Whitmore bride did. Her role was not passive. It was initiation by confession. She recited secrets of her own, details that no bride should reveal on her wedding night. She spoke of past lovers, of lies told to protect the clan, of small betrayals that proved her loyalty was not to her husband, but to the family. With each word, her voice grew stronger, colder, until Ward realized he wasn't marrying a girl at all. He was marrying the embodiment of the Whitmore covenant itself. At the height of the ritual, Elias ordered the lamps extinguished. Darkness swallowed the chamber. Only the faint glow of the carved symbols, painted with some phosphorus mixture, remained. In that half-light, the family chanted again, not words this time, sounds, tones that bent the mind and made time unravel. Ward fell to his knees. clutching his head as visions swarmed his drugged mind, faces melting, corpses marching, his own body lying cold beneath the earth. When the lamps flared back to life, Elias's final decree was delivered. Ward was told that from this night forward, he did not belong to himself. His thoughts, his actions, even his betrayals, every part of him now fed the Whitmore name. If he tried to resist, if he ever spoke a word of what he saw, they promised his soul would never find rest. Above them, the town slept in peace, never knowing that beneath the soil, another man had just been turned into a ghost while still breathing. Captain Ward woke the next morning not in the grand chamber where the ritual had ended, but in a narrow, windowless room. A cot, a jug of water, and a single wooden chair were all that greeted him. The stone walls seemed to breathe, their dampness creeping into his skin. For a moment he wondered if the night had been a fever dream, some cruel hallucination born of fatigue and opium. But when he touched his face, he felt the bruises fresh, deep, undeniable. The pain was proof, the ritual was real. Eliza appeared hours later, her white gown replaced by a heavy black dress. She no longer resembled a bride, she looked like a widow. Her eyes carried none of the warmth they had during the vows. Instead, they carried a warning. She placed a bowl of bread in front of him, but her words were sharper than any blade. "Eat," she told him. "You'll need strength. They'll test you again tonight." Ward tried to protest, to demand answers, but Eliza silenced him with a stare. She was no longer his wife in any sense that mattered. She belonged to the clan, and her loyalty was a weapon. He understood then he hadn't just married into a family, he had been absorbed into a system. When the evening came, the Whitmores gathered once more, but this time it was not in the ritual chamber. It was in the cellar, where walls were lined with bones arranged like trophies. Some were animals, some, unmistakably, were not. Elias Whitmore presided at the center, a book in his hand so worn its pages seemed ready to crumble. No one outside the family had ever been allowed to see it. Elias called it the ledger. Inside were names, hundreds of them, generations of those who had joined, betrayed, or been destroyed by the Whitmores. Ward was commanded to add his own name, sealing his place in their history. His hand shook as he dipped the quill into the ink, but Elias forced it down until the signature B led across the page. With that, Ward was no longer just a prisoner, he was documented property. The family cheered, not with joy, but with hunger, as if another vein of power had just been opened. And in that moment, Ward realized something far worse than his own fate. This ritual had been repeated for centuries. He was not the first to be broken, and he would not be the last. That night, Captain Ward couldn't sleep. The cellar's chant still echoed in his head. The flicker of candlelight burned behind his eyelids. He had signed his name into their ledger, but his mind rebelled against it. A soldier, trained to survive, doesn't surrender so easily. Yet here, the battlefield wasn't land or sea. It was inside his very soul. When the iron door creaked open, he expected another test of obedience. Instead, two figures entered silently, Jonas Whitmore, the family's youngest son, and Eliza. Jonas carried a lantern, its flame barely lighting the damp corridor. Eliza's hands trembled as she motioned for Ward to follow. They led him through a passage beneath the house, deeper than any foundation should have allowed. The air grew colder, sharper, carrying the stench of earth long undisturbed. Finally, the tunnel opened into a cavern where the ceiling disappeared into darkness. At its center stood a stone altar, older than the house itself. Carvings of spirals and faceless figures wound around its edges, their surfaces smoothed by centuries of blood and fire. "This is where it began," Jonas whispered. His voice quaked with reverence and fear. "Our family's covenant was forged here in 1721. Every union since must be sealed in this place. You thought last night was the wedding. No, it was only the invitation." Ward's stomach twisted. He realized the vows, the ledger, the rituals, none of it had been the climax. It was only the initiation. Eliza's eyes met his in the lantern's dim glow. For the first time since their wedding, he saw a flicker of the woman beneath the ritual. But her words crushed any hope he carried. "They will cut you," she said softly, "and what bleeds out will not be you anymore. If you resist, you'll end up with the bones." Ward glanced toward the altar, its grooves designed to collect what spilled upon it. The stone was stained dark, not with paint, but with the permanence of countless sacrifices. He knew then why the family looked at him with such hunger, because he was about to be remade into one of them, whether he willed it or not. In that cavern, beneath the weight of centuries, the Whitmore legacy prepared to swallow him whole. The lantern flame sputtered as they approached the altar, shadows stretching like claws across the cavern walls. Captain Ward's boots scraped against the stone floor, his breath catching as he realized how many had walked this same path before him and how few had walked back. Jonas set the lantern down, its glow catching on tools laid neatly at the altar's base. Not weapons, not instruments of craft, but blades honed thin as razors, each marked with strange sigils etched along the steel. They were not meant to kill, they were meant to carve. Eliza moved closer, her face pale, her hands folded tightly in front of her. She looked less like a bride and more like a witness forced into silence. Jonas spoke the words his father had once spoken to him, the same words that had bound each Whitmore across generations. To seal the covenant, the flesh must remember, the blood must declare allegiance, the spirit must yield. Ward's chest tightened. He had faced bullets, cannon fire, storms that swallowed ships whole, but never had he felt fear as sharp as this moment. The cavern pressed down on him, the air thick, the altar humming as though alive. Two more family members entered, cloaked in black, their faces hidden by hoods. They carried a vessel of water so dark it seemed to absorb the lantern light. Jonas dipped his fingers into it and began tracing symbols across Ward's chest, cold lines burning like fire as they sank into his skin. "You will forget who you were," Jonas murmured. "You will belong to us." The first blade kissed his shoulder, not deep, but deliberate. A line of blood welled, running toward the grooves carved into the altar. The stone drank greedily, as if waiting centuries for this moment. Another cut followed, then another, small, precise, not to kill but to mark. Each incision whispered a theft of self, a rewriting of identity. Ward clenched his jaw, refusing to cry out. If they wanted his soul, they would not take it easily. He held Eliza's gaze, searching for resistance in her eyes, but saw only despair. And then, from the depths of the cavern, a sound rose, a low hum, not human, not of this earth. The altar vibrated beneath him, the very stone pulsing with hunger. The sealing had begun. The sound swelled until it was no longer a hum but a chorus, throats without bodies, voices without breath. It rolled through the cavern walls, deep and mournful, layered with tones that struck something primal inside Captain Ward's chest. Every instinct screamed at him to fight, to flee, yet the weight of the ritual held him fast. Jonas raised his arms, and the cloaked figures circled the altar, their steps measured, their chanting falling into rhythm with the cavern's pulse. The air grew heavy, the flame in the lantern bending unnaturally as though dragged toward the stone itself. Ward felt his wounds throb, each cut glowing faintly as if alive. His blood was not just dripping, it was flowing in deliberate channels across the altar, lines carved long before his arrival, lines designed to carry sacrifice into something far older than the Whitmores themselves. Eliza's lips trembled. She whispered under her breath, so soft only Ward caught the words, "Forgive me." It wasn't marriage she had promised, it was delivery. Jonas's voice thundered now, commanding, not human in its force. "The covenant is renewed, the blood is offered, the guardian shall awaken." At those words, the cavern floor shifted. The stone beneath Ward's back trembled, as though something vast stirred below. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the water in the dark vessel rippled without touch. Ward strained against the ropes, his muscles burning. He was no stranger to captivity, but this was not war. It was surrender to forces he could not aim a musket at. Rage flared in his chest, the last ember of defiance. "You think I'll bow to this madness?" he spat, voice ragged. Jonas leaned close, eyes gleaming with something unholy. You already have. The moment you stepped inside, the moment you agreed to Eliza's hand, your fate was sealed. You were never chosen for love, Captain. You were chosen for blood. The voices grew louder. The altar vibrated harder, cracks splitting along its surface, and from those cracks, a light began to seep, green, unnatural, alive with malice. Ward felt it pressing into him, probing, searching for a way in. His mind reeled, flashes of memory tearing loose. His mother's face, the ocean's spray, the roar of cannon fire, all ripped away as the force sought to unmake him. But in the chaos, he realized something. The ritual wasn't perfect. The altar strained as though resisting its own purpose. There was a flaw hidden deep within the covenant, and if he could find it before the stone opened fully, he might still live. The cracks in the altar widened, glowing veins of green carving through the black stone like lightning frozen mid-strike. The air turned sulphurous, heavy with the stench of rot and salt water, as if the ocean itself had died and festered in this cavern. Captain Ward's body jolted against the bindings as the light spread under him. The ropes dug deeper into his skin, burning now, not just restraining. He twisted, feeling the altar's tremor beneath his back, something vast pushing upward, desperate to be born. Jonas lifted his arms higher, his voice a booming command that rattled the very bones in Ward's chest. The cloaked figures fell to their knees, foreheads pressed to the stone, their chants unbroken. Eliza did not kneel. She stood frozen, her hands clasped tightly, her gaze fixed on Ward, with a war between pity and obedience. The stone split wider. From the fissures came not fire, not water, but movement. Tendrils, pale and glistening like roots starved of sun, slithered upward. They pulsed, searching, reaching toward the blood that flowed from Ward's wounds. He thrashed violently, veins bulging in his neck as he fought the restraints. The realization cut through his panic. Jonas wasn't summoning a god. He was feeding a prisoner, something buried alive beneath this earth long before men built houses on it. The tendrils found the blood. They hissed, shriveling back for a heartbeat before surging again with greater hunger. Each drop Ward lost, the cavern pulsed brighter, the whispers louder. "Eliza," Ward roared, his voice cracking, "if you've any mercy, cut me free." Her lips parted, trembling, the knife at her side quivering in her grasp. But Jonas's gaze snapped to her like a predator's. "Do not falter. His sacrifice is the covenant. His suffering is our salvation." Ward locked eyes with her, his fury cutting through the dread. "You think this will save you? This thing will devour you all. I've seen monsters on battlefields, Eliza. They never stop with one corpse." For the first time, her composure cracked. A tear traced her cheek. Her hand twitched at the knife's hilt, caught between love and duty, survival and damnation. The tendrils surged higher, brushing against Ward's ribs, searing like acid as they tasted his flesh. The altar buckled beneath him, groaning as if the cavern itself was alive and straining to contain what clawed from below. And through the chaos, Ward spotted it, a section of the altar's carvings fractured differently than the rest. A weakness. If he could exploit it, even bound, he might shatter the ritual. But he would need Eliza's hand to do it. Eliza's hand hovered over the knife like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Her knuckles whitened as the chants swelled, drowning out her pulse. She looked at Jonas, then back at Ward, her eyes wild with a torment no priest's teachings could quiet. Ward's chest heaved, every breath slicing through him like broken glass. The tendrils tightened around his sides, burrowing closer, their hunger vibrating in his bones. He forced his voice steady, not as a plea, but as a command. "Eliza, look at me. Not him, not them, me." Her gaze locked with his, trembling but unbroken. Jonas's shadow loomed, arms raised like a conductor summoning an orchestra of hell. His chant sharpened, cutting through the air with words not meant for human tongues. Ward gritted his teeth. "If you cut me free, I'll end this. But if you cut me down, if you let this thing drink me dry, you'll never see the sky again. None of you will. You'll be slaves to whatever crawls out of here." The cavern rumbled violently, stones falling from above, smashing against the floor. A fissure split through the altar beneath Ward's spine, widening the mark he had seen. The weakness was real. Jonas's eyes narrowed, his voice turned venomous, though he did not break the ritual. "Choose, girl. Your bloodline stands or falls tonight. If you betray us, you betray everything your mother died to protect." Eliza flinched as if struck. Her mother, always the shadow haunting her steps, always the weight Jonas used like a chain around her throat. Ward seized the moment, his voice raw but piercing. "Your mother isn't here. I am. And I'm telling you, you are stronger than him, stronger than this." For a heartbeat, silence fell inside her. Just the knife in her hand, the sound of her breath, the tremor of the earth beneath her feet. Then she moved. The blade flashed in the green light, arcing downward. The rope binding Ward's wrists snapped, hot blood flowing where the fibers had bitten too deep. Gasps erupted among the cloaked followers, their chants stuttering, breaking. Jonas's face contorted with fury. "No!" The tendrils lashed wildly, sensing the fracture in the ritual, hungrier, faster. Ward's free hand clawed at the ropes, desperate to tear them loose. Eliza struck again, her knife slicing at the bindings, her breath ragged with terror and defiance. The altar shook harder, the fissure split wider, and from it a roar emerged, ancient, thunderous, a sound of something waking that should never have stirred. Jonas leapt forward, his own blade raised, not to stop the creature but to strike Eliza down before she could undo his covenant. Ward's other arm ripped free, bloodied, shaking, but free. The fight for Eliza, and for the fate of the ritual, had begun. Jonas came at her like a predator unchained, blade flashing in the cavern's eerie light. His cloak whipped back, revealing arms carved with symbols that glowed faintly, as if his skin itself had been etched into the ritual. Eliza stumbled, her knife barely lifting in time to deflect the slash. Sparks of steel scraped the darkness, her cry swallowed by the echoing roar beneath the altar. Jonas pressed forward, relentless, his strength unnatural, driven by the pact he'd sworn. Ward ripped the last binding loose, flesh tearing as the ropes pulled away. His arms burned with blood loss, his body weak, but rage carried him forward. He hurled himself off the altar, crashing into Jonas with enough force to drive both of them against the stone floor. The cultists shrieked, their chant unraveling into chaos. Without the rhythm, the cavern groaned, stalactites shaking as though the entire mountain were rebelling against what they'd summoned. The green light pulsed erratically, no longer steady, bleeding into flashes of black. Jonas snarled, spitting blood, his knife darting for Ward's throat. Ward caught his wrist mid-strike, muscles screaming as he forced it aside. The blade scraped across his collarbone, shallow but searing. Ward's other hand clenched Jonas's throat, pressing down with every ounce of fury he had. "Eliza, now!" Ward roared. She didn't hesitate. She drove her knife down, slashing through the last rope binding his leg. The altar groaned, fissures splitting wider as the carved mark fractured like shattered glass. From the wound in the stone, a tendril burst free, thicker than before, its surface glistening with something between blood and tar. It whipped toward them, striking the ground where Eliza had stood a moment before. She rolled away, heart hammering, the blade still clutched in her hand. Jonas twisted under Ward's grip, his eyes blazing with madness. "You fool! You think breaking the ritual will stop it? You've only opened the gate wider." Ward slammed his head into Jonas's face, bone crunching, blood spraying. The cult leader reeled, stunned but not broken. "Eliza, get out of here!" Ward barked, never loosening his hold. But Eliza shook her head, chest heaving, her face lit with something new, not fear, defiance. "Not without you!" The cavern roared again, louder this time, a voice beneath the earth, deep and hungering. The tendrils thrashed violently, no longer obeying anyone's command. The battle was no longer just against Jonas. It was against the thing beneath the stone and the price of every choice they made. The cavern shuddered as if the mountain itself were choking. A fissure split the altar in half, stone grinding against stone, and from its wound the first full tendril erupted, thick as a tree trunk, slick with a black sheen that reflected the green glow. It moved with impossible speed, slamming down among the cultists. Bones cracked like dry sticks. Screams filled the air as 3 of them were swept up and flung into the cavern wall, their bodies breaking against rock before crumpling into silence. Eliza froze for a heartbeat, eyes wide at the carnage. This wasn't a ritual anymore. It was a feeding. Ward shoved Jonas away, both men staggering as the tendril lashed again, carving deep trenches into the cavern floor. Jonas regained his footing, blood streaming down his face, but his grin only widened. "Do you see, Ward?" he bellowed over the chaos, his voice thick with madness. "It has answered, it hungers, and it will not stop until all flesh bends to it." Another tendril burst upward, this one twisting like a serpent, snapping its length toward Eliza. She dove behind a fallen stone, the air shrieking as the appendage struck where she'd stood. Shards of rock sprayed over her back, cutting into her skin. She hissed in pain but kept moving, knife gripped so tightly her knuckles went white. Ward staggered, blood dripping from his collarbone, his vision blurring, but the sight of Eliza jolted him awake. He grabbed the fallen chain that had once bound him, wrapping it around his fist like a weapon. The cultists tried to regroup, chanting in broken tones, their words frantic, but the thing below didn't care for their prayers. One tendril whipped through their circle, crushing two at once, dragging their bodies into the crack of the altar. The screaming didn't stop when they vanished. It only deepened, muffled, as if swallowed into something vast beneath. Ward lunged too, over Eliza, dragging her to her feet. "We can't fight this here. We need to move, now." Jonas barred their path, knife raised, his cloak snapping as a tendril curled protectively near him, almost like it recognized him. His eyes glowed faintly green in the light. "You won't leave," he hissed. "You'll kneel." The cavern roared again, louder than thunder, a single sound that made the ground quake and the air curdle in their lungs. The tendrils lashed indiscriminately now, no longer guided, no longer restrained. This wasn't Jonas's ritual anymore. It wasn't anyone's. It was the creature's awakening. The chamber dissolved into pure chaos. What had been an ordered ritual, guided by Jonas's hand, now erupted into blind frenzy. The cultists who only moments ago chanted in unison now screamed at one another, some falling to their knees in desperate prayer, others clawing at Jonas himself. "You lied to us," one howled, blood running down his mouth. "It's not under your control. It's devouring us." Jonas slashed at him without hesitation, his knife opening the man's throat. Blood sprayed across the cracked altar, mingling with the black ichor. Jonas's face twisted with something between joy and terror, his voice breaking as he shouted, "It is control. Sacrifice is the only control." But his words fell flat against the horror unfolding. Tendrils whipped wildly, some seizing cultists and dragging them shrieking into the fissure, others striking walls with bone-rattling force, shaking loose boulders from the ceiling. Dust clouded the air, choking every breath. Ward yanked Eliza toward a narrow path along the cavern's edge, shouting over the roar of stone and flesh. "Stay low! Move!" Eliza stumbled but kept pace, clutching her blade. Her eyes never left Jonas, who stood defiantly before the growing maw, his body framed in green light. A tendril coiled at his feet like a loyal serpent, yet even he swayed as though the very force he had unleashed was draining him. Behind them, the cult splintered, half-turned on Jonas in a frenzy of rage, attacking him with makeshift weapons while the rest fled blindly into the dark tunnels. The creature's tendrils struck at both sides without distinction, reducing men to pulp, dragging others screaming into the abyss. One cultist managed to drive a dagger into Jonas's back. The blade sank deep, and Jonas staggered forward, blood blooming across his robes. Yet instead of collapsing, he laughed, a raw, jagged sound that made Eliza's stoma turn. "You think this will stop me?" he gasped, spitting blood. "I've given it more than you ever could. I've given it myself." The cavern floor split wider, a yawning crack spreading beneath the altar. From the depths came not just tendrils, but the first glimpse of something larger, vast scales, glistening with black slime, shifting in the shadows. Ward shoved Eliza hard against the wall as another tendril struck, the force of it cracking stone inches from her head. His own chest heaved, eyes darting toward the widening fissure. "We're out of time. If that thing climbs free, the whole mountain goes with it." Jonas dropped to his knees, blood pouring from his wounds, arms spread wide. The creature's tendrils curled around him almost tenderly, lifting him like an offering. His eyes locked with Eliza's through the dust and carnage, and his lips curved into a crimson smile. "You'll see," he whispered hoarsely. "You'll all see." The thing began to rise. The air turned heavy, pressing against Eliza's lungs as the fissure widened. Heat and stench poured from below, carrying with it a sound that wasn't a roar or a cry, but something older, a vibration that rattled the very marrow of her bones. Jonas hung in the tendrils, his body bloodied yet alight with something unearthly. The black ichor crawled over his skin like living armor, seeping into his wounds, knitting them shut in grotesque patterns. His eyes glowed faintly green, and when he opened his mouth, his voice carried two tones, his own and the guttural echo of the thing rising from the abyss. "I am no longer a servant," Jonas declared, his words shaking the chamber. "I am the bridge." Ward pulled Eliza forward, forcing her toward a collapsing arch that might lead to escape. But Eliza's gaze locked on Jonas, transfixed by the transformation. His body stretched unnaturally, his limbs elongated, veins pulsing with black fire, his face contorted as if it were being sculpted by unseen hands, the man she had known vanishing beneath the mask of something otherworldly. The tendrils wrapped tighter around him, but no longer as prey. They cradled him, sinking into his flesh, fusing until his screams became hymns. Where blood had spilled, green light now pulsed, spreading outward in jagged waves that fractured the stone floor. "Eliza!" Ward shouted, shaking her arm. "Move, damn it! He's not Jonas anymore." But Jonas, whatever he had become, wasn't finished. He raised his hand and the very air buckled. A cultist who had survived the chaos was lifted screaming into the air, his body imploding in a burst of bone and gore. The ichor absorbed it all, feeding the creature and Jonas alike. Eliza tore her eyes away, bile rising in her throat. Every step toward the exit felt like wading through water, the weight of the unseen force dragging at her body. Rocks rained from the seal, and the crack widened into a gaping wound across the chamber, splitting the altar in two. Jonas's voice followed them, deep and resonant, carried by the rising storm of the abyss. "You think you can flee? I am not bound to this pit. I will walk where you walk. I will see what you see. I will be what you fear." Ward shoved Eliza through the arch as the floor behind them collapsed entirely, swallowed into the black. For a heartbeat, she saw Jonas's new form in full, a fusion of man and monster, crowned in tendrils, his eyes blazing with the abyss itself. And then the rock gave way, and the chamber was consumed. The tunnel pitched and groaned, a dying beast collapsing around them. Eliza stumbled, her palms tearing open on jagged stone as she scrambled after Ward. Dust filled her mouth and throat, choking each breath. Behind them came the sound, Jonas's new voice, not carried by footsteps but by the walls themselves, seeping through the rock like a disease. "Eliza." The syllables stretched, warping, as though 100 mouths whispered her name at once. "You cannot run from me. I am already inside the stone. Inside you." Her legs buckled, but Ward hauled her upright, dragging her through a fissure barely wide enough to squeeze through. The rock was hot to the touch, as if the cavern itself had caught fire from below. Veins of green light threaded through the cracks, pulsing in time with Jonas's words. The passage split ahead, two corridors winding into darkness. Ward hesitated, his lamp sputtering, his eyes darting between the paths. The left tunnel echoed with faint whispers. The right gaped wide and silent, yet the silence felt worse, too complete, as if sound itself had been strangled out of it. "Which way?" Ward rasped. His face was streaked with blood and grime, his breath ragged. Before Eliza could answer, the whispers grew louder, a chorus of soft, wet voices that crawled under her skin. She pressed her palms against her ears, but it did nothing. The words weren't coming through sound, they were burrowing into her mind. "Stay, yield, return." Eliza shook her head violently, nails digging into her scalp. "Not that way," she gasped, pointing toward the silent corridor. "Anywhere but there." Ward didn't argue. He shoved forward, and together they plunged into the stifling black. Their footsteps slapped against the damp ground, every sound magnified in the silence. Behind them the whispers fell away, but Jonas's voice did not. "I do not need corridors to follow. UOP. End the way for me, Eliza. You carried me here when you first read the words. Your hands pulled the veil aside. You are mine." A low rumble rolled through the stone, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Chunks of rock rained down, one smashing against Ward's shoulder with a sickening crack. He stumbled but kept moving, his jaw clenched against the pain. Eliza's chest burned, her lungs screaming for air. Yet worse than the exhaustion was the truth blooming inside her chest. The possibility that Jonas wasn't lying, that she had been marked long before tonight. They burst into a wider chamber, the ceiling lost in shadows, stalactites like jagged teeth looming above. Ward collapsed to his knees, clutching his shoulder, his lamp flickering weakly. And then the silence broke. From the dark above, something shifted, heavy, wet, alive. The sound was slow at first, deliberate, like the peeling of flesh from bone. A wet drag, followed by a steady drip that echoed through the cavern. Eliza froze, her eyes darting upward. The lamp's faint glow caught movement, something slick sliding along the ceiling, folding and unfolding like a living shadow. Ward groaned, clutching his shoulder, his breath shallow. "Don't look at it," he whispered. His voice trembled, stripped of the iron he'd carried until now. But Eliza couldn't stop. The thing shifted again, and for a moment its form resolved. Not Jonas, not entirely. His outline was there, the long arms, the head bent too far to the side, but his body had grown wrong. It was fused with the cavern itself, its limbs tapering into tendrils of black stone that writhed and dripped as if melting. His face was stretched and split, his mouth impossibly wide, teeth growing like stalactites from the inside of his skull. When he spoke, the sound wasn't a voice anymore. It was a vibration that rattled through her bones, 1,000 insect wings buzzing within her skull. "You gave me birth, Eliza. You gave me flesh. Why do you flee your own child?" Eliza staggered back, her heart pounding, her hands shook, nails cutting crescents into her palms. "You're not Jonas," she spat, though her voice cracked. "You're not even human." The thing laughed, and the cavern quivered with it. Dust rained down, coating her tongue with bitterness. Ward forced himself upright, his good arm bracing against the wall. He pulled a small object from his coat pocket, a shard of something pale, almost luminous. Eliza had seen it once before in his office, half hidden among his books, a relic he swore he'd never use. Now it pulsed with a soft, steady light, the first warmth this abyss had shown. The creature hissed, shrinking slightly into the dark, its tendrils curling tight. "Eliza," Ward said, his voice sharp despite the pain. "This is why I came here. The relic doesn't just repel it, it binds it, but I can't hold it for long." His gaze flicked to her, desperate, fevered. "If you want to end this, you'll have to finish what Jonas started. Speak the words again, but differently. Force them to chain instead of release." Her stomach dropped. To finish it meant to trust the very words that had damned them. To speak them was to risk becoming what Jonas had become. The thing on the ceiling laughed again, its voice now split between mockery and hunger. "Yes, Eliza, open your mouth. Let me in." Eliza's throat felt carved from stone. The air burned as though the cavern itself was waiting for her to speak. Ward's hand shook violently around the relic, its glow flickering as if the abyss were trying to snuff it out. Every second of hesitation let the creature's body seep further from the ceiling, drooping downward, dripping tendrils that sizzled where they touched the ground. Her brother's face was still there, buried in the mass of shifting flesh and black stone, his eyes locked on hers. For the first time, they weren't mocking, they were pleading. "Sister," Jonas whispered, his real voice slipping through the horror, trembling and weak. "Please, don't bind me. Kill me. End this." Eliza staggered back, torn between two impossible commands. Ward shouted, his voice hoarse. "He's gone, Eliza. If you listen to him, you'll let it break free. Speak the words now." Her lips trembled. The syllables pulsed in her memory, strange and ancient, each one like a worm writhing beneath her tongue. She knew if she gave them shape, the abyss would hear her. It would either obey or claim her. The cavern groaned. Cracks spread through the walls, as though the stone itself couldn't hold the thing much longer. The relic's glow dimmed further, and Ward dropped to his knees, clutching it like a drowning man clings to driftwood. The creature, Jonas, or what had been Jonas, smiled with teeth like broken glass. "You can't bind me, Eliza. You are me, my blood, my shadow. If you speak, you don't chain me, you open yourself, and I will wear your skin." Eliza's nails cut deeper into her palms until blood slicked her fists. Her heart thundered against her ribs, each beat like a hammer. If she spoke, she might save the world, or she might damn herself. If she stayed silent, the relic would fail, Ward would die, and the thing would climb free into the earth above. Her voice came, raw, cra-icked. Almost unwilling, she whispered the first syllable. The cavern shook violently. The creature screamed, not in rage, but in triumph. Ward's eyes widened. "Eliza, stop, it's twisting the words." But her mouth was already moving, her tongue no longer her own. The words poured from Eliza's mouth like oil, thick and heavy, coating the air until the cavern itself vibrated with the sound. She could feel her jaw move, her tongue shape syllables she didn't understand, yet they rolled out of her throat as though carved into her marrow long before she was born. Ward's scream tore through the chamber. He clutched the relic tighter, pressing it to his chest, but the glow sputtered and bent toward Eliza instead, as if the artifact had chosen its new master. The veins along her neck lit faintly, dark crimson lines pulsing like roots burrowing outward beneath her skin. Jonas, or the thing within him, laughed. Its voice split into two tones, one guttural and alien, the other achingly familiar. "Yes, my sister, you were always mine. Even before birth, the abyss whispered in your blood." Eliza staggered, her body half her own, half something else. Her fingernails lengthened into jagged points, dripping black resin. Shadows crawled across her arms like living brands, twisting into symbols that mirrored the ones carved into the cavern walls. Each symbol burned, but with a fire that thrilled her instead of tearing her apart. Ward scrambled to his feet. "Eliza, fight it! You're binding yourself, not it. Don't you see? It's feeding through the words." His voice broke into a desperate sob. "If you don't stop, you'll be the vessel." For an instant, she felt herself again. She looked at Ward, his face smeared with blood and fear, his hands trembling but still reaching for her. That single touch of humanity cracked the hold the abyss had on her mind. The words faltered, choking halfway up her throat. The cavern reacted violently. Stone cracked. Stalactites rained down. The ground beneath her feet shifted as though something massive coiled just below the surface. The creature roared, part anguish, part hunger, its tendrils whipping like serpents. In a frenzy. Eliza's body shook violently, torn between collapse and transformation. Her voice was still caught on the final word, the one that would seal the binding or complete the surrender. Her skin split along her arm, not with blood, but with blinding light and crawling shadow fused together. Half of her face was still her own, wide-eyed and terrified, the other half twisted into something that grinned with a mouth too wide, too sharp, too hungry. Ward dropped the relic, his voice breaking. "Eliza, tell me you're still in there." For a heartbeat, silence. Then her voice, layered with two tones, whispered back, "I don't know." Ward froze, his lungs refusing air, his mind refusing the truth that stood in front of him. Eliza, his blood, his only anchor, was now a fractured mirror, half radiant, half monstrous. The relic at his feet flickered weakly, as though mocking his hesitation. The cavern howled with the force of her transformation. Loose stones rattled, and a wind without source whipped through the chamber, carrying with it the stench of iron and burnt marrow. The abyss wasn't just seeping through her, it was wearing her like a mask. Jonas, or the hollowed shell he'd become, stepped closer, tendrils dragging across the ground. His voice slithered through Ward's ears, dripping venom. "Look at her, brother. She is the threshold. You can save her, yes, but only by letting her finish the word. Let her speak, let her open the passage. She'll live, and she'll reign." Ward's chest tightened. He had seen what reign meant in the visions the abyss had forced upon him. Cities burned to cinders, rivers thick with black water, humanity crawling in chains before a throne of bone. Eliza seated there, not herself, but something vast puppeteering her flesh. "No," Ward whispered, but the word was too soft to matter. Eliza's eyes locked on his. One glowed with the warmth of the sister he had grown up with, the girl who mended broken toys and hummed lullabies when nightmares came. The other eye bled black, pupil stretched into a slit, watching him not with love but with hunger. "Ward," she said, or half said, half hissed, "help me." He dropped to his knees, torn between instinct and reason. If he struck her down now, he might sever the abyss's hold, but he might also kill her outright. If he let her finish, she might survive, but at the cost of everything else. The relic pulsed again, brighter now, as if sensing his indecision. His hand hovered over it, fingers trembling. The cavern seemed to lean closer, waiting, the abyss holding its breath. Jonas laughed, teeth bared too wide. "Do it, brother. Choose. Save her and damn the world, or kill her and damn yourself." Ward's hand closed around the relic, its heat biting into his palm. He rose to his feet, eyes wet, throat raw, the decision heavier than the cavern walls pressing down around them. "Eliza," he whispered, his voice breaking, "forgive me." The chamber erupted with light and shadow as Ward moved, his choice made. The relic detonated in Ward's grip, a searing white fire that split the chamber in two. The blast threw Jonas backward, his tendrils snapping like charred rope, his laughter breaking into a shriek. The abyss recoiled, its grip loosening for a heartbeat, but in that heartbeat, the truth of Ward's choice struck harder than the light itself. Eliza convulsed, her scream cutting through him like steel on bone. The abyss ripped out of her in ragged ribbons of shadow, howling as if torn from a nest of nerves. The cavern walls wept black ichor that evaporated under the relic's blaze. For a moment she was only his sister again, eyes wide, lips trembling. She looked at him, broken but clear. "You," she gasped, blood at the corner of her mouth. "You chose me." Ward caught her before she hit the ground, the relic burning hot between them. Tears blurred his vision, but her weight in his arms told him she was still alive. Not whole, not yet, but alive. Then the silence broke. From the far side of the cavern, Jonas dragged himself upright, half his face melted into ruin, yet his grin carved deeper. His voice was lower now, reverberating like a drum inside Ward's ribs. "You think you've won? You've only starved it. It will come again. And next time, brother, she won't survive the tearing." Ward tightened his hold on Eliza. Her breathing was shallow, but her eyes, one still hers, one still veined with the abyss, remained locked on him. She was fighting, clinging to the sliver of self the relic had protected. The chamber shook, dust raining down from the ceiling. The relic flickered, its once blinding flame dimming fast. Ward knew its power was spent. What he had bought was not victory, but time. He staggered to his feet, Eliza leaning against him, the two of them framed in the fading glow. Jonas watched, blood dripping from his mouth, that ruinous grin unbroken. "Run," Jonas said, his voice echoing with inhuman certainty. "Run while the abyss sleeps, but remember, every dream she dreams, every shadow she casts, it will be there, waiting. And when it wakes again, it won't be her body it claims first. It will be her soul." Ward didn't answer. He only held his sister tighter, stepping toward the mouth of the cavern, into the uncertain dark of what lay ahead. The relic's glow guttered to a faint ember. The choice was made. The cost had only begun. The cavern's breath followed them. Every step Ward took carried the echo of something vast and watching, as if the walls themselves leaned closer to taste their fear. The relic's ember barely lit the path, a weak orange glow trembling in his palm. Without its blaze, the shadows seemed hungrier, more alive, stretching toward Eliza like skeletal fingers. Her weight slowed him. One moment she was lucid, whispering his name with the fragile tenderness of the sister he remembered. The next, her voice shifted, low and guttural, muttering syllables that scraped his ears raw. "It still sees. It still wants." The abyss spoke through her in fragments, slipping past the relic's dying shield. Ward pressed her closer. "Stay with me, just a little further." The tunnel narrowed ahead, rocks pressing in, the smell of damp stone and ash thick in the air. Behind them, Jonas's laughter still reverberated faintly, not from his body, but from the walls, the water dripping, the wind. The abyss had not been banished. It had only been scattered into pieces, fragments waiting to gather again. Eliza's nails dug into his arm. Her eyes rolled back, veins spider-webbing across her skin as the whispers surged. She began to fight him, weak but desperate, thrashing as if her body belonged half to something else. The relic flared faintly at her touch, burning her hand. She screamed, a sound that wasn't entirely human, and then went limp in his arms. Ward froze. For a heartbeat, he thought she was gone. Then her chest rose, shallow, uneven, but alive. He forced himself onward. At last, faint air hit his face. The end of the tunnel glimmered with natural light. He stumbled faster, his boots splashing through shallow water, his breath ragged with exhaustion and rage. He broke into the open, out beneath a storm-racked sky. The ruins of the asylum loomed above, its stones slick with rain, windows dark, and watching. For the first time since the relic burst, Ward allowed himself a breath. The world outside was no less haunted, but it was theirs. Eliza stirred. Her lips moved against his chest, whispering words that weren't hers. Not escaped, only delayed. Her voice broke, softer now, the sister's voice he clung to. "Ward, promise me, if it takes me again, you'll finish what you started." Lightning split the sky. Ward stood in the rain, holding her as the asylum seemed to lean closer, its silhouette jagged against the storm. He said nothing, because any promise would bind him to a fate darker than the cavern. The abyss was still with them. It walked in her veins. It waited in the silence between thunder. Rain beat against the ruins like a war drum, each strike reminding Ward that the world outside the cavern was no safer. He carried Eliza into the skeletal remains of the asylum's courtyard, broken walls and collapsed arches offering the only shelter. She stirred faintly, her breaths shallow, her skin clammy beneath his hands. The relic pulsed weakly at his side, no longer a shield but a reminder of how close they had come to losing everything. Ward pressed her against a wall, kneeling before her. "You're still here," he muttered, almost pleading. But her eyes flickered open only halfway, pupils blown wide, lips moving without sound. Then he heard it, soft, faint, almost drowned beneath the storm. Whispers. Not her voice, not human. The abyss was speaking through her still, drip by drip, seeding itself deeper. Ward clenched his fists. The promise she had begged from him still echoed in his skull. If it took her again, he would have to end it. The thought tore him apart. He had spent years clawing to keep her alive, to shield her from the asylum's shadow. Now the asylum lived inside her. He rose, scanning the courtyard. The storm's wind carried faint sounds, voices, not abyssal ones but human. Lanterns flickered in the distance, cutting across the rain. Townsfolk, hunters, maybe even priests from the village who had once cursed the asylum's grounds. Word had spread. People had seen the storm, felt the tremors from beneath the earth. The figures drew closer, cautious but armed. A man's voice cut through the rain. "Who's there?" Ward tightened his grip on Eliza. If they saw her like this, if they heard the whispers bleeding from her lips, they would burn her alive without hesitation. To them, she would not be a victim, she would be an omen. "Stay back," Ward called, his voice hard enough to pierce the storm. But the lanterns didn't falter. More were appearing now, cling, their glow like predators' eyes. The abyss had spilled into the world, and these people knew something unnatural had awakened. Eliza coughed violently, a spray of black water spilling from her mouth onto the stones. The whispers sharpened, twisting the air. The villagers froze, their fear snapping into place. One shouted, "Witch!" Another raised a rifle. Ward stepped in front of her, the relic glowing faintly at his side. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating the scene like a vision carved in fire. He knew what they saw, a man protecting the very thing they believed cursed. The abyss had left the cavern. Now it was here, in the open, feeding on suspicion, fear, and rage. And in the distance, hidden from all but Ward's instincts, Jonas was watching, alive in some form, gathering the abyss's scattered fragments, waiting for the perfect moment to rise again. The rifles rose first, Fear always moved faster than reason. Ward held his ground. Eliza slumped behind him, her whispers carrying like smoke through the storm. The villagers' faces flickered in the lantern light. Men who had lost children to fever, women who had buried husbands in the soil that drank too much rain. Hard lives, hardened hearts, and now they saw the abyss wearing Eliza's skin. "Step aside," one barked, voice cracking with the brittle courage of a man terrified of what he must do. Ward didn't move. His hand rested on the relic, its pulse faint but steady, like a dying heartbeat. "She's not what you think." His voice cut sharp, but it trembled beneath. "She's fighting it. She's still human." The word human sparked something, mocking laughter, bitter disbelief. "I hear it," another spat. "The devil speaks through her mouth. We'll burn the body before it spreads." Eliza stirred at the word burn, her lips moving faster, the whispers spilling into words not meant for human throats. The villagers recoiled as though struck, a woman shrieking, clutching a charm to her chest. Fear thickened into violence. Ward's muscles locked. This was the moment Eliza had feared, the moment society itself would finish what the abyss had started. His promise weighed on him like an iron chain. He had sworn to protect her, even from herself. But could he protect her from them? From 100 torches and rifles, from centuries of superstition sharpened into justice? He stepped forward, relic raised, its dim glow flaring against the storm. "You'll have to go through me." The villagers faltered, torn between terror and rage. The relic unsettled them, its unnatural light no less frightening than Eliza's whispers. To them, Ward was no longer a savior, but a conspirator, a man bound to the abyss as tightly as the girl. Then a shot rang out. The sound shattered the storm. The bullet struck stone inches from Ward's head, sparks spitting into the rain. Shouts erupted. Some pressed forward, others held back, but the storm of panic had broken loose. Eliza's voice rose into a wail that wasn't hers at all. The ground shuddered, stones cracking underfoot. The abyss stirred again, hungry for blood, eager for the chaos blooming in human hearts. Ward dragged Eliza up, desperate, as the storm turned blacker than night. For a split second he saw beyond the villagers, beyond the storm itself, Jonas, half-formed in the distance, stitched together from shadow and water, smiling through a face that wasn't his. Ward realized then, the abyss didn't need to hide anymore. It had everything it needed, a vessel, a crowd ready to kill, and Jonas, its chosen hand, waiting for the slaughter to begin. The storm broke into madness. Rifles cracked, torches swung, shouts tore through the air. The villagers surged forward, not as individuals, but as a single blind animal driven by fear. Their boots splashed through the mud, hands gripping iron and wood, faces twisted into something less than human. Ward braced himself, dragging Eliza behind him, the relic burning hot in his grip. Its glow pulsed like a heartbeat fighting against death, casting jagged light across the mob. For an instant he thought it might scatter them. Instead, it enraged them further. "He carries it!" someone screamed. "He carries the cursed relic!" The accusation spread like fire through dry hay. The crowd turned not just on Eliza, but on Ward himself. He was no longer their protector. He was the traitor who had brought the infection home. A bottle smashed near his feet, fire licking up from the oil within, twisting in the rain like a snake of flame. Eliza gasped, her whispers breaking into cries, half human, half something else. The ground quivered beneath them. Ward knew if she lost control now, the abyss would claim them all. And then, Jonas stepped into the open. He moved with unnatural grace, his body shifting as though the storm itself carried him forward. His eyes glowed faintly, reflecting both torchlight and something deeper, something older. He raised his hands, calm as the mob foamed around him. "Brothers, sisters," he called, voice smooth as silk but echoing like thunder. "You were right to fear, but you were wrong about her." The crowd froze, torn between rage and awe. Jonas's voice wove through them like a spell. "She is no longer the vessel. She is broken. The abyss chose me." The words hit Ward like a blade to the chest. Jonas smiled, and in that smile Ward saw the truth. He had embraced the corruption, not fought it. The whispers that tormented Eliza now sang in harmony with his breath. "You see your enemy there," Jonas continued, pointing not to himself but to Ward. The relic belongs to the abyss. He seeks to keep it, to chain us. He fears your awakening." The mob turned as one, their fear bent, reshaped into purpose. Torches lifted higher, rifles found their aim, and for the first time, Ward understood this wasn't just fear, it was worship. Jonas had become their prophet. Eliza clutched Ward's arm, her nails digging deep, her voice breaking through the storm. "He's opening the gate." And with those words, Ward felt the ground split beneath them, a wound tearing through the soil, black water rising. The earth tore open like flesh beneath a blade. Black water surged upward, spilling across the square, swallowing boots, torches, and voices. The mob that only moments ago moved with certainty now stumbled, their rage collapsing into panic. Yet Jonas stood unmoved, arms stretched to the storm, as if he had called this rift himself. The relic in Ward's grip pulsed violently, each throb sending shocks through his arm. Eliza screamed as the whispers thickened, no longer inside her mind alone, but filling the night air, echoing from the torn ground. It wasn't a voice, but a choir, thousands upon thousands of tongues chanting a language older than stone. Ward tried to drag her back, away from the split, but the crowd pressed in. Some fell to their knees, faces lit by awe. Others clawed to escape, tripping, drowning in the black flood. Jonas's voice cut through the hysteria, stronger than thunder. "The gate is not death, it is deliverance. Look upon it and see your true home." The villagers turned to him, many collapsing in worship. Ward felt bile rise in his throat. This wasn't just control. Jonas had become the bridge between them and the abyss. The man he once knew had surrendered fully. Eliza's body convulsed. She was caught between resisting and succumbing, her cries broken, desperate. "Ward! It's calling me. I can't." He gripped her tighter, teeth clenched. "You're stronger than it. You are not theirs." Jonas laughed, a sound so hollow it scraped at the bone. "She was never yours to save. She was the doorway. Now she is the key." The ground beneath Eliza glowed faintly, the water swirling around her feet like it recognized her. The abyss wanted her, needed her, and Jonas was feeding it. Ward raised the relic high. Its light struck against Jonas, and for a heartbeat the whispers faltered. The mob shrieked as if burned, shielding their eyes. Jonas staggered but did not fall, his grin carved deeper into his face. "You can't fight what you already belong to," he hissed. The gate widened, the water rising higher, dragging wood, stone, and flesh into its current. The world was being unstitched at its seams. Ward knew he had one choice left, to either unleash the relic fully and risk burning Eliza with it, or watch the abyss devour everything. And as thunder split the sky, the decision fell on him. Ward's grip on the relic seared through his skin, but he held on. Eliza's body convulsed in his arms, the abyss pulling at her soul. Jonas stood over them, drenched in the black tide, his voice like thunder. "The veil tears tonight. Nothing can stop it." Ward's chest ached. He pressed his forehead to Eliza's, whispering through the storm, "Forgive me." With a final breath, he drove the relic into the earth. The world split in two. Fire and shadow erupted, colliding in a roar that shook the marrow of the living. The mob screamed as their worship turned to ruin, their bodies shredded in the blaze. Jonas staggered, his triumphant grin breaking into terror as the light carved him to nothing. The abyss howled, a scream so sharp it cracked the heavens. The black tide reversed, sucked into the closing wound of the gate. The rift snapped shut with a final roar, silence falling in its wake. Ward collapsed, smoke curling from his body. The relic shattered into dust. Eliza stirred faintly, breath returning in shallow gasps. She was alive. He had chosen her, and somehow chosen the world too. But as he held her, his ears caught it. Whispers. Faint, slithering, curling like smoke through the silence. Not gone, not silenced, only buried, waiting. Ward's eyes burned as he looked toward the horizon. A faint glow pulsed in the distance beyond the hills like a heartbeat beneath the earth. He knew what it meant. The abyss was not finished. It had only marked its next host. And when it rose again, it would not come as shadow. It would come wearing a human face. Ward's hand trembled as he realized the truth. The war had not ended. It had just begun.